I guess I could tie this into plot armor part 2. Mr. John A. Douglas does bring up a point. Depending on the kind of narrative tension you're looking for, he just feels like this is like what he wants to share. It's just rules that he wants for when he's writing. No one should be safe from death, but don't use death as part of luring readers in, i.e. who's going to die in this book. I come from the opposite end of that, where my heroes pretty much, yes, guys, they do have plot armor. The villains have plot armor up to a point, but I come from a different direction where the villains will eventually die. There's no way around that, really. For me, they're the ones that are going to be suffering the most casualties. Just going in, good wins, evil loses, that sort of thing. I'm not going to be subverting much expectations there at all. So yeah, you have that. Again, some readers will be turned off of something when they realize that there is some plot armor going on. Just like what Mr. Rick was saying in his whole different types of narrative tension. Yeah, when I'm reading something, if a character dies, it pretty much is like, okay, that means that character's story is pretty much like going forward. They might get referenced, or they might have a flashback with that character every once in a while, but the overall main part of the story, that character's role is done, and there won't be any kind of additive thing that's coming in from that angle in terms of the story going forward. So in a way, I do appreciate stories where the heroes have more plot armor often than not, which kind of segues a little bit into even what happened with the Harrington series. McGinnis, the Harrington's aide, basically her cook and that sort of thing, his wife, Weber's wife, loved that character, so that character was the one that had 100% plot armor. Harrington's death was kind of waylaid and turned around because apparently she was supposed to die, I think, in the same book that Alistair McKinnon bit the bullet in. But even the Harrington series has limited plot armor. There are characters where they're going to get out. I kind of realized this partway through, especially once she had to pilot that ship into the pirates' territory, after she got benched from her own government, and then the Graysons came in like, oh, hey, you want to be an admiral in our navy and that sort of thing. But you could tell once Nimitz fell in love with another tree cat, that tree cat was basically, oh look, it has plot armor, but not the poor engineer that came with the tree cat, Samantha. And eventually, the way stuff played out, especially after Samantha basically paired off with Whitehaven, it's just like, yep, I know where he's going with this. In retrospect, especially now that I have a little bit more writing experience under me, I'm like, oh, I could see where that was going. Aha! But again, that doesn't really ruin a story for me. For some people, the plot armor is the deal breaker. Once they know it's there, they're just like, I'm out! My narrative tension is dead now! It's like, I can obviously tell who's the favorite, or that sort of thing. So it's something you gotta balance for yourself as a reader and writer. Some writers will be more often than not, either they'll be way to the extreme where it's like everything can die, anything can die, everything that moves can die, or you'll have it to where, on the opposing end, where nothing dies at all. I like to think that I'm gonna have a balance of where, again, most of the villains are pretty much going to die. And if you've been reading along, you've basically see bits and pieces of what's going to happen to Unity. Because I want to showcase to readers, yes, you can see in these little bits and pieces, and if you can't already tell from the quotes at the beginning of each chapter / issue, that I showcase, the Sleeping in Starlight stuff, where, yes, I'm weaving in bits and pieces of future events. Because everything else, as it's being told, majority of it is pretty much, I envisioned it kind of like what Interstellar did with all those video logs with people talking about how things were on Earth before they were able to get into those O'Neill cylinders and, go off and restart another Earth type planet. So in reality, Uplift Protocol is kind of like a retrospective framing device where you don't start getting the first person aspect of it, until Eliza is born and, basically old enough to start narrating some things. But that's why I kind of wanted to do a mixture of, framing this as kind of like a retrospective versus certain events that are happening in current time and then, basically future stuff. Like the whole aspect of the 42nd century stuff, sorry, because my brain is just like, I need more coffee. But the 42nd century stuff, that is also part of the grounded circuit I have for the time travel aspect. There's something very specific that happens in the 42nd century where there's a reason why there's a temporal kind of agency. You guys will see what'll happen later. But I really wanted to set up a kind of time traveling aspect where it was fixed, and it wasn't like where, say, like time travelers could pop in, kind of like Booster Gold, and accidentally oopsie daisy the timeline, and then like, oh no, we have like a mirror universe where everything went wrong. Well, no, I have a multiverse for that, where it's like some events played out differently, some other branches went on, the multi-string kind of theory stuff. But that's fine. You can have it there to kind of set up like a what if in case you need to use that plot element later for something. Not everything will completely tie in with each other, but hopefully I'll get across with this whole series of how I wanted to use time travel and even tie it into certain kinds of plot armor. Because from the get-go, good wins, evil loses. That's what I want to see in my entertainment. That's what I want to see in my books. That's what I want to see in my comics. So that's what I'm writing. So, plot armor can come in a couple different flavors. Some writers are more savvy enough to disguise it a bit more, and some don't disguise it as much. I don't feel like I disguise it too much. Because again, even from the get-go, with the Sleeping in Starlight quotes, that's like, yeah, Eliza's going to get to the end. And the way she's talking about other things, a majority of her friends are going to get to the end. In fact, a bit of a spoiler as far as the good guy side goes, most of them are pretty much going to die of old age. I know that might ruin the tension for some, but I've noticed when it comes to Uplift Protocol, I'm attracting more readers that are desiring things that I want. And this is fine. More than likely, a decent portion of people are more on the end of Mr. Douglas, where they don't want to feel like the characters have any kind of plot armor. They just want to see the chips where they fall. But he does still, again, bring up that good point. Don't use it as a part of luring readers in. Like the overall bloodbath of, say, the J.R.R. Martin setups. Because on that end of the spectrum, I mean, I'm pretty much lost as a reader, because it's like, why should I really invest in any of these characters if most of them are going to be dead anyway? Why should I see where their story goes if they're just basically cannon fodder for the setting? Now, I don't consider my villains cannon fodder. The henchmen probably feel like cannon fodder, but it's just like a balance. You have to balance out things that you want, and no matter what you do, no matter what you write, it's not going to appeal to everybody. Writing to market, most writers can eventually pick up how to write to market if that's really what they want to do. But sometimes when that happens, you'll get a deluge of everybody trying to get in on that big old gold rush. Now, some people can get on the ground floor if they know what they're doing and be like, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and, set up pretty well. and then you'll start getting people that are trying to get in on that ground floor. Maybe they might get halfway there, but it seems to me that right now isekai seems to be the big thing that people are jumping into, especially with lit RPG or lit RPG in general. Most people are going gold rush bulldozer mode towards that, to basically try to cash in on the overriding popularity, because a lot of people, if they do read stuff, they're reading it with more of a gaming mindset rather than just a regular reading mindset. So that's why you have this overabundance of lit RPG stuff everywhere. It's just the way it is. But by the time most writers get to the stage where they feel like they can publish something, even independently, most times those particular gold rushes have already passed. It happens sometimes. But how about you guys? What do you guys think about plot armor? Me personally, like I've said before, I don't mind it. I'll link Mr. Douglas's Twitter thread here below, but he does bring up a few more interesting points, so I guess I can kind of segue a little bit into some writing points. Don't undermine your main character with your side characters. Main character needs to be able to have something the others, basically they have some sort of quirk or skill that the others can't have. They should take charge when it makes sense. If your side characters do everything better, you create a more interesting main character than your actual main character. Which, it is also a symptom of what I see, a Mary Stew, Marty Stew kind of setup. If that particular character could do everything, then there's no reason for a side cast. But then if your side cast ends up overshadowing your main character, which I think is easy to do with dogs, because everybody loves dogs. But that's also something you gotta kind of balance out. That's the reason why I have Eliza's very competent in certain things, but in other aspects, she needs help. Like, say, Typherian light shaman stuff. She has no aptitude for that. Because her whole entire body is being used as a vessel. If I haven't already been blunt enough for that, there's a reason why convergence is a thing. And that I know convergence ideas are usually fairly popular in comic books and everything, but again, I'm also pulling in from a lot of different mediums I like, putting it all into this series. Let's see. Now, he comes in from an opposite direction than I do from, unless you got a new take on it, time travel is not your friend. It depends on your mindset. I really enjoyed the way Babylon 5 pulled off its time travel with Valen. And the way it made sense to me is, like, there's this complete circle that Jeffrey Sinclair did to become Valen. And then from Valen back to Jeffrey Sinclair. He doesn't derail the time stream or change events because he is that arrow shot from the bow to form that closed circle. Like, even though Battlestar Galactica, the reimagining part, kind of went a little bit off the rails with this part, all this has happened before and all of this will happen again. Well, Jeffrey Sinclair is kind of like that. He's born as a human, does his life as a human, goes to Minbari, to a Minbari, then you go back again in the closed circuit. Later on, he is reborn as a human, goes back, becomes Minbari, again and again and again. Because he didn't derail his own timeline. He recognized it for what it was, and it's like, that's why his existence as a human was his passing phase. He was that link, that important link to close off the circuit. Could he have derailed it? Yes, he could have, but JMS chose to make him a anchor rather than a derailment. So that's kind of how I view the time travel aspect. If you're going to have time travel, then either have it set up to where you can correct the timeline, which, Star Trek has done this a couple of times, I imagine. I just can't keep track of all of it anymore. But yeah, you can either have it where it's set up where there's another string universe out there that pops into existence, and your character goes back, to their home universe, and where they maybe didn't have that time travel, or it's just kind of a way to approach things. If you want time travel in your setting, then make sure there's a couple of solid rules for it, so that way you don't end up like later movies in the Terminator franchise, to where the impetus for the whole entire franchise ends up being an afterthought and like thrown away, i.e. John Connor. Again, folks, this is just my 2 cents. Take it as you will. Have a good day, everybody.